How to decide after infidelity. 7 reflections to help you. Infidelity doesn't just break trust. It breaks your perception of reality. One moment, everything makes sense. You know where you stand. You trust what you feel. You believe in what you built. Then suddenly, that ground disappears. Not gradually, instantly. And now you are left trying to understand something that does not fit into the reality you had before. The hardest part is not what happened. It is what it does inside you. You start questioning everything. Was it real? Did I miss signs? Was I blind? Or was I lied to so well that I never had a chance to see it? And the more you think about it, the more unstable everything feels. Because it is not just about him anymore. It is about your own judgment. And now comes the pressure. Should you stay? Should you leave? Should you forgive? Should you try again? Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a perspective. But none of them are inside your reality. None of them feel what you feel. And that is what makes this decision so heavy. Because you are not choosing between 2 simple options. You are trying to rebuild clarity in a moment where nothing feels clear. And if you try to decide from this place, you are not deciding. You are reacting. The mistake most people make after infidelity is trying to decide too fast. You feel the urgency. You want relief. You want clarity. You want to stop this constant loop in your mind where every thought leads to another question. So you start looking for answers. You ask friends. You search online. You compare your situation to other stories, hoping something will tell you what to do. But here is what is really happening. You are trying to make a life decision while you are still in shock. Your emotions are not stable yet. One moment you feel like leaving is the only option. The next, you remember something good and feel like maybe it can be saved. Then comes anger, then sadness, then confusion again. And in the middle of all this, you are trying to reach a final decision. That is why nothing feels right. Because you are not choosing from clarity. You are choosing from emotional overload. And when a decision is made from this state, it is usually not aligned with what you truly need. It is aligned with what gives temporary relief. Staying to avoid the pain. Leaving to escape the confusion. Forgiving too early just to feel peace again. But relief is not clarity. And if you rush this, you will not solve the situation. You will just move forward carrying the same uncertainty with you. You think you are deciding between staying or leaving. But that is not the real decision, because both options can lead to peace, and both options can lead to more pain. What you are actually deciding is what kind of life you are willing to live after this. If you stay, you are choosing a path that requires rebuilding trust, facing triggers, having difficult conversations, and accepting that things will never be exactly the same as before. Not better, not worse, but different. And you need to be honest about whether you have the emotional capacity for that. If you leave, you are choosing a different path. Letting go of what you built, facing the loss, dealing with the absence, and rebuilding your life without that person in it. That also comes with pain, that also requires strength. So the real question is not which option hurts less. The real question is which reality you can live with without losing yourself. Because people often make this decision based on fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of making the wrong choice. But fear is not a good guide. It pushes you toward what feels safer, not what is healthier. And if you do not shift your perspective here, every reflection that comes next will be distorted. Because you are not choosing between him and your life. You are choosing the kind of life you are willing to accept from now on. Before you decide anything, you need to understand what was actually broken. Because not every betrayal destroys the same thing. And if you don't see this clearly, you will try to fix the wrong problem. For some people, it's trust. That internal sense of safety that allows you to relax in the relationship. is gone, you start questioning everything. Words lose weight. Promises feel empty. Even when nothing is happening, your mind keeps searching for something that might be hidden. For others, it's the image of the person. The version you believed in no longer exists. You thought you knew who he was, what he was capable of, what he would never do. And now that image collapsed. And when that breaks, it's not just disappointment, it's disorientation. And sometimes what breaks is something even deeper: your self-worth. You start asking questions that have nothing to do with what he did, but everything to do with how it made you feel. Was I not enough? What did she have that I didn't? Why wasn't I valued? But here is the truth you need to face. If you don't identify what was broken, you will try to repair something that isn't even the real issue. You might try to rebuild trust when what you actually lost was your sense of value. Or try to move on when what you really need is to process the shock of who he revealed himself to be. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what exactly did this break inside me? Because your decision depends on that answer. Now you need to face a question that most people avoid because it is uncomfortable. Do you actually want to stay? Or are you afraid to leave? At first, it feels like the same thing. You tell yourself you want to make it work, that you believe in what you had, that you are willing to try. But if you look deeper, there is often something else underneath that desire. Fear. Fear of starting over. Fear of being alone. Fear that you will not find something like this again. Fear of letting go of the time, the memories, the plans you built together. And fear can sound very convincing. It can disguise itself as love, as commitment, as hope. But they are not the same. Because when you truly want to stay, that desire comes from strength. It comes from clarity, from knowing what you are choosing and why. When you stay out of fear, it comes from avoidance, from trying to escape the discomfort of letting go. And that difference changes everything. If you stay because you want to, you rebuild with intention. If you stay because you are afraid, you stay stuck in a situation that continues to drain you. So be honest with yourself here. If fear was not part of the equation, would you still choose to stay? Because many people are not holding on to the relationship. They are holding on to what leaving would force them to face. Now look at him, not at what he says, but at what he does after everything came to light. Is he truly remorseful, or just afraid of losing you? At first, both can look the same. Apologies, promises, emotional reactions, the urgency to fix things. But if you pay attention, there is a clear difference in direction. Fear reacts, remorse transforms. When someone is afraid of losing you, their focus is on the consequence. They want the situation to go away. They want you to calm down. They say what needs to be said to restore what they had. But once the immediate pressure passes, their behavior slowly returns to what it was. When someone is truly remorseful, the focus is not on saving the relationship. It is on understanding the damage they caused and changing the patterns that led to it. There is consistency, transparency, and a willingness to face discomfort without escaping it. And this is where you need to be careful, because words are easy in moments of crises. Emotion is intense right after being exposed. But real change is not measured in days or promises. It is measured in consistent behavior over time, especially when things are no longer intense. So ask yourself, if nothing changed beyond what he is showing right now, would it be enough? Because if the answer is no, then what you're holding on to is not what is real. It is what you hope he might become. Now, you need to confront something that most people avoid because it is exhausting to admit. Can you actually trust again? Or will you live in constant alert? Because rebuilding trust is not about saying, "I forgive you." It is about how your body, your mind, and your emotions respond after everything that happened. You might want to move forward. You might decide to stay. But what happens when he is late and does not answer? When he is on his phone and you do not know who he is talking to? When something small reminds you of what happened, do you feel stable or do you feel triggered? Because this is the reality no one talks about. Even if he does everything right from now on, your internal world still needs to process what was broken. And that does not happen just because you chose to stay. It takes time, emotional effort, and a willingness to face discomfort repeatedly. So the real question is not whether trust can be rebuilt in theory. The real question is whether you are willing and able to live through the process of rebuilding it without losing your peace in the meantime. Because if staying means constant anxiety, constant checking, constant doubt, then you are not rebuilding a relationship. You are living in a state of emotional survival. And no relationship can feel safe if you are always on guard. Now, you need to get very honest about your needs, not your hopes. Because love can make you accept promises that reality cannot sustain. You might be thinking about what it would take for you to stay. More transparency, more effort, more reassurance, more presence. You create a version of the relationship that feels possible if everything goes right. And in that version, it works. But the question is not what could work in the best case scenario. The question is whether he can consistently give you what you actually need, not just now, but over time. Because after infidelity, the relationship requires more structure, not less. More emotional responsibility, not less. More consistency, not less. And not everyone has the capacity to sustain that. This is where many people get stuck. They stay based on potential, on what he says he will do, on what he shows in moments of crisis. But once things calm down, the effort often fades. And then you are left asking for the same things again. So stop looking at what he promises. Look at what he is capable of maintaining. Because love alone does not rebuild a relationship. It requires emotional maturity, discipline, and consistency. And if what you need to feel safe is something he cannot consistently offer, staying will not fix that. It will only prolong the discomfort. Now you need to face something even deeper, something that is not about him anymore. Are you trying to save the relationship? Or are you trying to save the version of it you believed in? Because what hurts is not only what happened, it is the loss of what you thought you had, the story you created, the certainty you felt, the future you imagined. And letting go of that is not simple. So instead of accepting what the relationship is now, you keep reaching for what it was in your mind. You remember the beginning, the connection, the moments that felt real. And you try to rebuild from there, as if you could return to that version. But that version does not exist anymore, not because everything is ruined, but because reality has changed. And if you keep trying to fix the present based on a past that is no longer true, you will stay stuck between what was and what is. This is where emotional clarity becomes painful, because you have to grieve something that is not visible, not a person, not a relationship in the traditional sense, but the illusion you believed in. And until you let that go, your decision will not be based on reality. It will be based on attachment to something that is already gone. So ask yourself, am I trying to rebuild what is real or what I wish was still true? Now bring everything into one final, honest question. If nothing truly changes, could you accept this story as it is? Not the version where he becomes everything you need. Not the version where time heals everything. The version where what you see right now is what continues. Because this is where clarity stops being comfortable and starts being real. Most people do not decide based on what is. They decide based on what they hope will be. They stay because they believe things will improve, that this was an exception, that it will not happen again. But a decision grounded in hope is fragile. A decision grounded in reality is stable. So imagine your life 6 months from now, 1 year from now, with things exactly as they are today. The same patterns, the same level of effort, the same emotional dynamic. Can you live with that without feeling like you are betraying yourself? Because if the answer is no, then you already have your answer. You are not deciding whether to forgive him. You are deciding whether you can live with what this relationship is capable of being. And that requires honesty, not optimism. Now everything comes together, and this is the moment most people try to avoid. Because deep down, your answer is already there. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in the patterns you recognized, in the discomfort you could not ignore, in the questions that kept coming back no matter how much you tried to silence them. You already know what staying would require from you. You already know what leaving would demand from you. And more importantly, you already feel which one aligns with your peace and which one keeps you in tension. The real difficulty is not finding the answer. It is accepting what that answer means. Because once you're honest with yourself, you cannot go back to pretending everything is fine. You cannot unknow what you now see. And that is where fear shows up again, trying to make you doubt your own clarity. But clarity does not always feel comfortable. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like uncertainty. Sometimes it feels like stepping into something you did not plan. And even then, it is still truth. So stop asking what you should do. Start listening to what you already know. Because your decision is not something you create. It is something you recognize. You don't need to rush your decision, but you do need to be honest with yourself. Because time doesn't clarify everything. Sometimes, time only prolongs what you already feel. Staying without peace slowly drains you. It keeps you in a constant negotiation with your own emotions, trying to accept something that doesn't fully sit right inside you. And over time, that quiet discomfort becomes your new normal. Leaving with clarity, on the other hand, is not easy. It comes with loss, uncertainty, and the need to rebuild. But it also comes with something most people underestimate: relief. Relief from overthinking. Relief from doubt. Relief from trying to make something work that is already showing you its limits. And this is the truth most people avoid. There is no perfect decision after infidelity. There is only the decision that allows you to live with yourself in peace. So do not look for certainty. Look for alignment. Because at the end of this, what matters is not whether the relationship survives. What matters is whether you do. Now tell me, before you answer that question, pause and notice something important. Your mind is still trying to negotiate. It is trying to find a way where you don't lose anything, where you keep the relationship, keep the memories, keep the future you imagined, and at the same time, remove the pain of what happened. But that version does not exist. Every path comes with a cost. Staying has a cost. Leaving has a cost. And clarity begins when you stop asking which option is painless and start asking which cost you are truly willing to carry. Because right now, you might still be hoping that if you think enough, analyze enough, wait enough, something will become easier. But decisions like this don't become easier with time. They become clearer when you stop avoiding the truth. And the truth is not what sounds better. It is what feels real when you are completely honest with yourself, without fear, without pressure, without trying to protect anyone else's expectations. So take a moment and ask yourself one last question. If no one else had an opinion, if there was no fear of regret, if you only had to answer to yourself, what would you choose? This is where you stop searching and start deciding. Not based on pressure, not based on fear, not based on what you think you should do, but based on what you know you can live with. Because at the end of everything, this is not about him anymore. It is not about what he did, what he promises, or what he might become. It is about you, about your limits, your values, your emotional safety. Your ability to wake up every day and feel at peace with the choice you made. And that peace does not come from choosing the easier path. It comes from choosing the honest one. You might still feel doubt. You might still feel attachment. That does not disappear overnight, but clarity is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of truth, even when emotion is still there. So whatever you choose, make sure it is a decision that respects you. Not the version of you that is afraid. Not the version of you that is trying to hold on, but the version of you that knows what is acceptable and what is not. Because once you choose from that place, you don't just move on from the situation. You move forward with yourself intact. And this is where everything settles into something simple, even if it doesn't feel easy. You don't need more signs. You don't need more time to understand. You don't need one more conversation to confirm what you already feel. You needed space to see clearly, and now you have it. From here, your life will follow the decision you make. Not the words you say, not the intentions you hold, but the choice you act on. If you stay, stay with awareness. Not hoping it will become something else, but understanding exactly what it is and what it requires from you. Stay because you decided, not because you couldn't leave. If you leave, leave with clarity. Not running from pain, but choosing a path that protects your peace. Leave knowing that letting go is not failure. It is alignment. Because at the end, this was never just about infidelity. It was about truth. And once you see the truth, your only responsibility is to not betray yourself trying to avoid it. Now the decision is not unclear anymore. It is yours. And after the decision, there is something just as important that most people are not prepared for. What comes next? Because clarity does not erase emotion. You can make the right decision and still feel sadness, still feel attachment, still question yourself for a moment. That does not mean you chose wrong. It means you are human. If you stay, there will be days where doubt returns, moments where something triggers you and brings everything back. And in those moments, you will need to remember why you chose to stay and whether the reality still matches that decision. If you leave, there will be moments where you miss what you had, not what it became, but what it once felt like. And your mind will try to rewrite the story, focusing on the good and softening the truth. This is where people go back, not because things changed, but because emotions became louder than clarity. So whatever you decided, protect it. Not by forcing yourself to feel a certain way, but by staying connected to the truth that led you there. Because the hardest part is not seeing clearly. It is staying loyal to that clarity when your emotions try to pull you in another direction. At the end of everything, one truth remains. You can rebuild a relationship, but you cannot rebuild yourself the same way if you keep choosing against what you know is right for you. Because every time you ignore your own clarity, every time you silence what you feel to maintain something that no longer feels safe, you move a little further away from yourself. And that distance is much harder to repair than any relationship. So whatever you chose, make sure it was not based on fear, pressure, or the need to avoid pain. Make sure it came from honesty, because honesty protects you. Even when it leads to difficult decisions, even when it forces you to let go, even when it changes the direction of your life. In the long term, honesty is what allows you to live without regret. And that is the real goal. Not to save a relationship at any cost, but to move forward without losing who you are in the process. Because when you keep yourself intact, you don't just survive this, you come out of it stronger, clearer, and more aligned than before. And if there is one thing you take from all of this, let it be this. You are allowed to choose yourself without needing anyone else to agree. You are allowed to walk away even if others would stay. You are allowed to stay if it is a conscious decision that truly aligns with your peace. This is not about proving anything to anyone. It is about being able to live with your own choice when everything gets quiet. Because at the end of the day, you are the one who stays with the consequences. Not the people who give opinions, not the ones who tell you what they would do. You, and that is why this decision has to come from within. There is no perfect path. There is only the path that feels honest enough for you to stand by, even when it is difficult. So trust that, not blindly, not impulsively, but with the awareness you built through everything you just reflected on. Because when you choose from that place, you are not just deciding what happens next. You are defining the kind of relationship you will accept and the kind of person you choose to be from now on. And now, there is nothing left to analyze, only to be honest. You have already looked at the reality, questioned your emotions, faced what was broken, and understood what each path would demand from you. At this point, continuing to think will not give you a new answer. It will only delay the one you already have. Because clarity does not grow with overthinking. It gets buried under it. So this is where you stop going in circles, where you stop trying to make the decision feel easier before you make it, where you accept that whatever you choose will require courage, not certainty, courage. Courage to stay and face the process without losing yourself. Or courage to leave and rebuild without looking back at what could have been. And both require the same thing: respect for yourself. Because in the end, this decision is not about the past anymore. It is about the future you are willing to create from here. And the moment you choose that consciously, without avoiding, without negotiating with fear, everything begins to move forward again. Not perfectly, but truthfully.